My daughter stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold. "You either serve my husband or you leave," she said. The room went quiet. Even the air froze. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just smiled. Walked upstairs, pulled down the old suitcase I once packed for our honeymoon, and left the house I paid for. No goodbye, no second glance. A week later, my phone lit up with 22 missed calls. Too late. You see, I used to believe sacrifice was love, that if I kept giving one day, they'd see me. But that night, something broke inside me, and for once, I didn't try to fix it. Hi, my name is Evelyn Hartley. I'm 62, a mother, a widow, and until recently, a very quiet woman. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reach. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. If you've ever felt taken for granted, if you've ever had to walk away from people you loved just to protect what's left of yourself, please stay. I think you'll understand me more than anyone else. And if my story moves, you don't forget to subscribe. It helps more than you think, and maybe, just maybe it lets people like me know we're not invisible. Thank you. Now let me tell you everything. The night Savannah told me to leave, it wasn't loud. There was no screaming, no broken plates, no slammed doors, just her voice flat and cold as kitchen tile. If you can't help this family, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to live. She didn't even blink when she said it. Neither did I. I stood in that kitchen, the one I remodeled with my retirement fund, holding the dinner plates I had just dried. My knees didn't buckle. My hands didn't shake. I placed the plates back in the cabinet like nothing had happened. Kellen sat on the couch halfway through a beer. I bought, eyes glued to a football game he wasn't even watching. He didn't say a word. That house, I paid 80% of it. The down payment came from my pension and the life insurance I got after Samuel died. I paid the taxes, the utilities, the groceries when Savannah's hours at the salon were short, or Kellen was between jobs. I cooked, cleaned, picked up their baby from daycare. Folded laundry that wasn't mine, cleaned bathrooms I didn't dirty. But I never complained. Because that's what mothers do, right? We keep the peace. We say yes when we're tired. We get quiet when we're hurt. But that night, when Kellen barked at me for bringing him the wrong beer, not the cheap stuff Evelyn, the Corona I like, and Savannah stepped in, not to defend me, but to side with him. Something in me shifted. It didn't crack or shatter, it simply shifted like a chair leg slipping off balance. Subtle, but irreversible. I didn't argue. I didn't ask where they expected me to go. I simply walked upstairs. The baby was asleep. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender lotion and fried onions. I opened the closet and reached for the same suitcase I once packed for my honeymoon. It had a broken zipper and one wheel that stuck, but it rolled. It would do. I packed methodically. 2 pairs of jeans, 3 tops. My toothbrush, my reading glasses, my journal. The framed photo of Samuel and me at Crater Lake where he proposed. That was the last vacation we ever took. I didn't pack everything, just enough to leave without looking back. I grabbed my raincoat, stepped outside, and left. The rain had started. Fine, straight lines soaking the pavement. No one came to the door. No one followed. I sat in my car, started the engine, and drove. Past the diner where Savannah once spilled hot chocolate on her prom dress. Past the library where I used to read poetry aloud on Tuesdays. Past the life I built with every dollar I had and every ounce of love I knew how to give. I didn't cry, I didn't even sigh, I just drove. A week later, I was eating a stale bagel in a motel room when my phone buzzed. 22 missed calls, all from Savannah. I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I opened my journal and began to write. Line by line, every tuition payment, every car repair, every grocery run, every yes I whispered when I wanted to scream, every silence I swallowed to keep their world intact. The room I rented at Crater Pines Motel was small and smelled faintly of mildew and burnt coffee, but it was mine. The sheets were clean. The manager didn't ask questions, and for the first time in years, No one expected me to fold their laundry or reheat their dinner. I took the second-hand desk near the window and turned it into my command center. I had my laptop, a folder of old bills, 3 notebooks, and a highlighter. I started with the mortgage still in my name, of course. Savannah had no credit history when she got married. Kellen had even less. So when they said they needed help getting started, I co-signed. Then I paid it every month, automatically, $1.120. For 4 years. Utilities, I covered those too. My name on the accounts. Easy to forget until I started tallying them. $280 for electricity and water, $90 for internet. $3 and $10 for natural gas last winter when they forgot to refill the tank. Groceries. I didn't just buy food, I stocked their fridge. Formula, diapers, birthday cakes, champagne for their anniversary, organic almond butter because the baby can't digest peanuts. I couldn't afford vacations, but I could afford their comfort. And then came the credit cards. Savannah had been an authorized user on my Visa for years initially, so she could build credit. But the charges started adding up. Hair appointments, online orders, furniture, things I never bought. I thought maybe she'd pay me back once the salon picked up. She never did. I picked up the phone and canceled every automatic payment. Called the insurance company and removed both their vehicles from my plan. Called the bank and revoked Savannah's access. The woman on the other end asked, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I've never been more sure." I called my lawyer next, told him to update my will, remove Savannah, leave everything what little is left to the local women's shelter. He didn't ask why, he knew better. That night, I poured myself a cup of cheap motel coffee and opened my online banking. And that's when I saw it. A $3,000 charge to Cascade Downs Sportsbook. Another $840 at Cherokee River Casino. They weren't mine. They'd gone through my account, or Kellen had. I remembered that week he offered to help pay bills and asked for my login. I was tired, distracted. I said yes. He took more than access. He took trust. I sat in silence for a long time. The rain tapped the window like it had something to say. I opened the drawer, reached for my old classroom notebook, the one I kept even after retirement. On the first page was a quote I'd written in bold marker, "Never spend on those who can't say thank you." I stared at that line, read it again and again, and I realized I had broken that rule, not once, not twice, but for 5 years straight. I closed the notebook, picked up my pen, and drew a line under the quote. Then I started writing again, this time, not to remember, but to take back control. Word had started to float through Summerfield like smoke slow, at first, then everywhere. They said I'd lost my mind, that I'd run off in a fit of confusion, that I'd left my granddaughter behind without a word. At the grocery store, a cashier who used to call me Mrs. Hartley the Poetry Lady now spoke with careful slowness, like I might not understand change for a 20. At church during Wednesday coffee hour, someone said Savannah had told the prayer group I was just a little overwhelmed and needed a break from reality. I didn't correct them. I didn't defend myself. Instead, I went about my days quietly. I stopped by the bookstore downtown and left copies of the children's books I once read to Savannah in the donation bin. I returned to the community garden I helped plant years ago and pulled weeds from the rows of carrots without saying a word. People asked where I'd been. I smiled. That's all I did. And when they looked closer, I think they started to understand. It was at the bank 2 weeks after I'd left that the truth came out. I was there to close out an old savings account. The teller who called my number was a young woman named Daphne Hayes. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Mrs. Hartley," she whispered, coming around the desk. "You probably don't remember me. You taught me English in 9th grade. You gave me your own copy of The Bell Jar when I couldn't afford the book." I remembered. Daphne was the quiet one in the back row, loved to write but hated to speak. She used to hand me folded poems instead of homework. We talked for a bit. I told her I was downsizing, simplifying. She nodded, hesitated. "Ma'am, I hope it's okay to say this, but I saw your son-in-law a few months back. He came in with your daughter. They were applying for a second mortgage. $60,000. I froze. She glanced around, lowered her voice. He brought in paperwork, said the house was his. But I recognized the address. It didn't sit right, so I flagged it. Our manager caught the discrepancies before it processed. She looked at me carefully. The thing is, your daughter was there too. She signed the paperwork with him. I stared at her for a long time. My throat went dry. Not because of the fraud I'd suspected Kellen would stoop that low, but because Savannah had gone along with it. The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't stab. It settled slowly like frost creeping in through a cracked window. Daphne apologized even though it wasn't her fault. I thanked her, took my receipt, and walked back to my car without remembering where I'd parked. I sat behind the wheel keys in my hand and realized something quietly terrifying. I wasn't just lied to. I wasn't just used. I was never truly considered at all. There was no anger left, just cold. Not the kind that comes from wind or rain, but the kind that settles in your bones when something inside you stops hoping. And once it does, it doesn't come back. 2 weeks passed. I hadn't answered a single call, hadn't replied to a single message. But Savannah's texts started again. At first they were brief. "Hi, Mom, just checking in, then hope you're okay." Then they changed tone. "Mom, maybe there was just a misunderstanding. Please come home." For the baby. That last one caught me. She hadn't said anything about a baby before. At midnight one evening, my phone rang. Savannah's name lit up the screen. I debated ignoring it. But something told me to pick up. Her voice was shaky like she'd been crying. She said she was pregnant, said the stress was causing complications, that she'd gone to the women's clinic in town and the doctor warned her about elevated risk. "Mom, if you stay gone, I could lose the baby." I asked gently who her doctor was. She paused. "Dr. Richards at River Point." I knew that name. I took Martha there years ago. Dr. Richards had retired last spring. I ended the call kindly. Promised I'd check in. The next morning, I called River Point Clinic. There was no Dr. Richards, no patient named Savannah Reese, no prenatal visits in her name at all. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back. Later that day at the library, an old friend from my book club pulled me aside. "I just want you to know," she said softly, "that Kellen's been talking. Apparently, he'd been telling people I was confused, mentally unwell, that I'd suffered a late-onset decline, that I was being manipulated by an old friend who was trying to take my money. He said he was worried, that maybe I needed a guardian. I could see what he was doing. If he couldn't control me legally, he'd discredit me socially. And if that worked, the courts would follow. Mental incompetence is just paperwork if you repeat the lie enough times." But he wasn't finished. That evening, I received a phone call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Sheriff Clay Watson, now the police chief of Summerfield. He'd been a junior in my English class when I was still teaching. He once wrote me an essay about John Steinbeck that made me cry. He called to tell me that Kellen had filed a formal complaint. He claimed I was neglecting myself, that I might be at risk of self-harm, that I'd been making dangerous financial decisions under the influence of someone questionable. Clay told me the complaint wasn't being pursued. No medical documentation, no witnesses. But Evelyn, I've seen people like him before, charming until they lose control. If you need help, legal protection, I'll walk you through it myself. I thanked him. After we hung up, I sat still for a long time. The motel was quiet. The curtains fluttered slightly in the window. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "I need to file a protective order," I said. "A restraining order." "Yes." "What happened?" He made up a pregnancy, faked a mental diagnosis, filed a false report with the sheriff. My voice didn't shake. "One lie can be forgiven," I said. 3 lies means he's trying to erase me, and I wouldn't let him. Not this time. The restraining order paperwork was heavier than I expected, not in weight, but in meaning. As I sat across from my lawyer signing my name on each page, I thought about how many times I'd chosen silence, chosen peace over truth, That ended today. I handed over the scanned documents Daphne gave me, proof that Kellen had submitted falsified property papers to the bank. My name, my house forged to look like his. My lawyer nodded grimly. We added it to the civil suit for fraud and property manipulation. By the time I walked out of the office, the air outside smelled like summer rain and change. A few days later, I got a phone call from Jennifer, a friend whose son had briefly worked with Kellen at the used car lot off Redwood Avenue. "You haven't heard," she asked. "He's been fired." Apparently, 3 customers filed complaints in the same week. Each said Kellen borrowed money under some made-up emergency and never paid them back. One of them had already seen my lawsuit posted online. Word was spreading. The mask he wore in public was slipping fast. That week at the town market, I walked past the bulletin board by the bakery. Something caught my eye, a flyer printed in color. My name in bold letters, from beloved teacher to homeless liability, Evelyn Hartley and the curse of late-onset madness. Below it, a doctored quote, allegedly from me, "I don't remember who I am anymore." The post cited Kellen's social media, false, humiliating, and desperate. I didn't take the flyer down. I took a picture. Then I sent it straight to my attorney. Public defamation, documented. A few days later, I was walking past Summerfield Square when I heard his voice, loud, dramatic. A small crowd had gathered near the fountain, and there he was pacing with a paper in his hand like he was preaching scripture. He was telling them I'd thrown him and Savannah out, that I'd abandoned family for some old flame from high school, that I was too far gone to make sane decisions. I could have walked away, but I didn't. I stepped forward. He noticed me. His voice caught in his throat. I walked right up to him, looked him straight in the eye, and asked loud enough for the entire square to hear, "How much do you owe the Cherokee Casino? Kellen 15,000, or was it 25 gasps?" Silence. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned, walked away. Heels clicking against stone, the square so quiet I could hear the fountain again. That night, I printed everything: bank statements, legal filings, email chains, screenshots of forged signatures, the restraining order, the lawsuit, the smear campaign. This wasn't just about my name anymore. It was about making the truth louder than their lies. The restraining order was officially in effect by noon on Friday. Sheriff Clay delivered the notice himself, handed it to Kellen, and made sure he understood the terms. Kellen wasn't allowed within 300 feet of me, couldn't contact me in any form. Violations would be treated as criminal offenses. But just hours later, a text came in from a blocked number. "You think you won?" The law doesn't scare me. I stared at the message. No punctuation, just the kind of threat someone makes when they feel themselves slipping. Roy, the veteran who managed the cabin property where I was staying, came to my door that night. "Ma'am," he said, "I don't want to alarm you, but that man, your son-in-law, he was here. About 2 a.m., driving slow, circling the lot. Asked which unit was yours. I told him to leave. Roy had installed cameras around the property. We reviewed the footage together. There he was, Kellen's car, his face, his voice on the audio asking about me. I copied the video and sent it to my attorney. One more strike against him. But his world was collapsing faster than I expected. Once it became clear I had legally separated myself from their finances, the creditors came for what was left. Collections notices were posted on Savannah's front door. Her phone lit up day and night. They froze their joint accounts. Garnishment letters followed. One by one, the cards fell. That night, she called me. Her voice was raw. "We're going to lose the house. I'm being sued. People are threatening to come to the salon. I can't fix this." I let the silence linger. Then I said quietly, "That's what happened to me, Savannah. The difference is, you stood there and watched it." She cried. I didn't stop her, but I didn't comfort her either. Later that week, I agreed to meet her, a public place, neutral ground. We chose Beans and Bloom, the cafe where we once threw her 10th birthday party. The same little table by the window was still there. She wore sunglasses, though it wasn't sunny. Her hands shook. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I do," I said. I slid 2 envelopes across the table. One holds a draft, a public statement, an apology addressed to the community acknowledging what happened, your role, his actions, and your intent to separate yourself from him. If you post this, send letters to your creditors and begin to make amends, I'll reconsider the inheritance terms. She blinked. "The other envelope," I said, "means you keep your silence and lose everything. No trust fund, no access to any property in my name, and no more contact." Her shoulders collapsed. She cried. But this time the tears weren't for money. They were for truth. I didn't reach for her. I didn't stroke her hair. Instead, I placed one last item on the table. A sealed envelope with my handwriting on it. Sunday, Grace Church, 10 a.m. I'll be sitting in the front pew. You know where to find me. Then I stood up and walked away, leaving her with choice and silence. Sunday morning, I arrived at Grace Church at 9:30 a.m., just as the bells began to chime. In my tote bag were neatly labeled folders, copies of every legal document, every financial record scans of forged papers, and the restraining order. I didn't know if Savannah would come, but I had prepared myself for both possibilities: forgiveness or a final goodbye. Grace had always been more than a church to me. I used to teach Sunday school here. I once sang alto in the Christmas choir. I sat beside my husband every Easter morning in the 3rd pew from the front. We carved our initials into the oak bench once back when we believed in forever. Today the church was fuller than I'd seen in years. Whispers fluttered like hymns between pews. People didn't say my name, but they all looked toward the doors. At 9:57 a.m., she walked in. Savannah's hair was unbrushed, eyes ringed with exhaustion, but her steps were steady. She wore no makeup, no jewelry, and most importantly, no Kellen. She didn't sit next to me. She didn't even glance in my direction. But I saw her spine straighten as she walked slowly down the aisle and stopped by the pastor's side. "May I say something?" she asked just above a whisper. The pastor looked at me once, then gave her a small nod and stepped aside. Savannah turned to the crowd. Her voice shook but held. "My name is Savannah Reese. I am the daughter of Evelyn Hartley, and I want to set the record straight." Every pew stilled. Even the youngest children stopped fidgeting. She took a breath, then began to speak. "My mother paid for my college degree, 4 years of tuition books housing. She paid for my wedding $30,000. She paid 80% of the mortgage on our home. She covered 2 years of utility bills, health insurance, groceries, my daughter's crib, and first set of clothes." She looked down, then back up. "And I let my husband, my now ex-husband, convince me to sign papers that weren't ours. I knew about the fraudulent mortgage application. I knew what he planned to do, and I said nothing." A gasp rippled through the room, but Savannah pressed on. I told myself I was protecting my family. I told myself it wasn't that bad, but the truth is, I was afraid of starting over. And in doing so, I gave up my mother. Her eyes welled. I don't know what I traded her for: security, comfort, a lie that looked like love. But I know what I've lost. And it's more than money. It's more than a house. I lost the one person who never stopped fighting for me, even when I stopped fighting for myself. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I simply sat there, hands folded in my lap, and listened to my daughter take responsibility, perhaps for the first time in her life, not out of fear, not to bargain, but because it was finally hers to own. After the service, people came up one by one. No one asked for details. No one offered advice. Just gentle hands on my shoulder, a nod, a smile, silent acknowledgments of what had been too loud for too long. Savannah waited until the church had mostly emptied. Then she walked over. "I've written the letter to the town," she said. "The Facebook post is ready to go live. I'm speaking to the divorce attorney again tomorrow." I didn't offer a hug. I didn't promise anything. Instead, I said, "Don't do it for me. do it because you finally see yourself." And for once she nodded like she understood. 1 month later, I stood on the sidewalk across from the house that used to be mine. The sun filtered through late summer trees, casting golden light across the newly painted shutters. It no longer belonged to me, but it didn't belong to them either. Today I was signing the final papers officially, transferring the property to New Roots Housing, a nonprofit that supported single mothers escaping domestic abuse. The house was now 3 units each, one a new beginning. I signed the deed with a steady hand. Not a farewell, not regret, just clarity. It was no longer my burden to carry, and that made it lighter than ever. Back at the cabin, I planted more lavender by the steps. The porch roof had a new beam I'd installed myself with the help of Roy and an old YouTube video. My books were arranged by poetry and season. There was a kettle that always whistled when it boiled and a rocking chair that creaked just right. Peace wasn't loud. It didn't arrive with fanfare. It built itself day by day, action by action, until you looked up one morning and realized the silence didn't hurt anymore. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from Savannah. "Mom, I met with the lawyer. The papers are filed. I've started working at the bookstore again. I'm learning how to live without leaning. If you still have that cafe table by the window, would you let me sit with you?" I didn't reply right away. I finished slicing carrots for the stew, stirred the pot, set the table for one. Then I brewed a pot of tea and wrote one line back. Saturday, 10 a.m. East Window. The old bakery. I'll be waiting. As I hit send, I looked out toward the lake. An osprey dove low, catching a fish in one smooth sweep. The water rippled behind it, then stilled. Not every wound heals clean. But peace doesn't come from reclaiming the past, it comes from choosing what to carry forward. And sometimes that means choosing to stay. Other times it means knowing when to let go. And every now and then, it means knowing who's worth welcoming back.